TSN Week with Ala Mazur, presented by TSN.
We were planning to start this episode differently, but the events of last night changed everything. Ukraine's strategic partner, the United States, has indeed entered the war between Israel and Iran and dropped its super bombs on Iran's largest nuclear facilities, including the deeply buried Fordo nuclear center where uranium was being enriched. Fortunately, no nuclear weapons were used, although the nuclear option had also been considered. President Trump proudly called the operation an outstanding success and warned that future attacks on Iran could be much worse. Iran urgently requested an emergency meeting of the UN Security Council and threatened eternal consequences. This is a quote from Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi. Washington is already preparing for these possible consequences in the next 48 hours. European leaders emphasize that it is unacceptable for Iran to acquire nuclear weapons, but they urge all parties to return to the negotiating table. I quote the head of European diplomacy, Kaja Kallas. EU foreign ministers will meet tomorrow. Ukraine urgently evacuated 176 of its citizens and citizens of partner countries from Israel the day before. And this evening, a statement from our Ministry of Foreign Affairs was released. The Iranian nuclear program must be brought to an end, the statement says, so that it never again threatens either the countries of the Middle East or any other states. End of quote. Iran is clearly our enemy, and weakening it means weakening Russia. So has Iran's nuclear potential really been destroyed? And what does this turn of events mean for the world and for Ukraine? We'll talk about this and more in the next hour. This is TSN Week. The more you know, the better prepared you are. Greetings to everyone watching us on our YouTube channel as well, and coming up in the broadcast, a shockwave from the Middle East.
Yes, exactly in this kind of gap.
What could be the consequences of the current US attack on Iran's nuclear facilities right before the NATO summit?
Mega escalation in the future.
How this will hit Russia and ricochet onto Ukraine. Revenge served by drone.
I bet everything on the glass. Lift.
How a small unit of FPV pilots became a legend and a major headache for the occupiers.
A new phase of the war has begun.
And why night drone hunts in the air and on land could thwart Putin's plans for a summer offensive. An exclusive report from the steppes of Donbass and the office of Commander-in-Chief Syrski. The elimination of the killer's factory.
And the FSB agents are hearing about this right now.
They still think he's gonna kill him.
How the Russians tried to kill a well-known military figure right in the center of Kyiv, and how Ukrainian intelligence outplayed the FSB at its own game. A new SBU operation after which Kremlin heads and epaulets will roll. Forced homelessness.
All this needs to be done before winter.
Why shouldn't you rush to repair your home if your building was hit by shelling? How to get in line for compensation and which documents you need to prepare right now, even if you live in a safe area. A detailed guide from TSN Tiesden. And first, about what we have all been through. The night before Tuesday, and once again a massive attack on Ukraine, once again a combined assault attack drones plus ballistic missiles, once again the heartbreaking deaths of innocent people. That night in Kyiv, a Russian missile pierced straight through an entire entrance of an ordinary apartment building, from the roof all the way down to the shelter where sleepy people were trying to hide. 23 of its residents were killed. In total, there were 28 victims in the capital that night and more than 140 wounded. And that's only in Kyiv, because at the same time, the Russians were also striking Odessa and Zaporizhia, and then throughout the week, Kremenchuk, Sumy, Kherson and Kharkiv. Moscow has changed its tactics and now sends all drones and missiles at individual cities so that no air defense system can withstand it. Today, missiles attacked Kramatorsk again. 3 people were killed and they struck a training ground. The guys responded to the alert. The worst was avoided, but there are still casualties and wounded. And the demonstrative attack on Kyiv took place exactly when the leaders of the G7 gathered in Canada. And President Zelensky was also flying to that meeting to seek help. However, the head of the United States didn't even notice this blatant war crime by the Kremlin and urgently left to deal with another war. Was this really the reason for Trump's hasty departure from the summit in Canada? Politicians and the media doubted it for a long time because in the end, when it came to deciding whether to get involved in the Iranian conflict, he first took 2 days to think and then 2 weeks. And just literally the day before yesterday, European diplomats in Geneva were persuading their Iranian counterparts to continue negotiations with the United States and to prevent the escalation of the conflict. So what was the trigger in the last 24 hours? Why did the topic of 2 weeks disappear? What could be the next step after the current US attack on Iran's nuclear facilities? And what conclusions can Ukraine already draw for itself? TSN Week correspondent Alexander Zahorodny has gathered what is known so far.
War in the Middle East is nothing new, but only until America starts to get involved. In recent weeks, the United States has already sent a third aircraft carrier to the region. These floating cities, with tens of thousands of soldiers and hundreds of aircraft, are always accompanied by submarines and missile carriers. Their combined firepower is capable of crushing any resistance from most countries on this planet. But what drew particular attention was the mass takeoff of these B-2 Spirit stealth strategic bombers. However, the main sign that war is near has been these videos from American soldiers.
So, how's your steak and lobster? All good? Almost not bad? I'm ready for war. We're going to war?
American soldiers know that if they're served steak and lobster, it means a military operation is coming. Friday the 13th, Israel launches a combined strike on Iran with missiles, aircraft, and drones. Airfields, missile launchers, nuclear facilities, and government quarters are burning.
In the first 24 hours of the operation, Israel almost completely destroyed Iran's air defense and nearly paralyzed the actions of its air force. In this way, Israel paralyzed Iran's ability to deliver a heavy retaliatory strike.
Military and political analysts are actively discussing this attack, but almost no one is predicting that this is just the beginning of a major special operation. On the night of June 22nd, Donald Trump enters the White House dressing room and puts on his favorite cap, "Make America Great Again." Yes, it is in that very cap, and literally live on air, that he begins to watch as the world's most expensive bombers start delivering devastating strikes with the most powerful non-nuclear bombs. The Pentagon stated that this operation had been prepared for weeks in great secrecy. 7 B-2 bombers took part in the strikes on Iran. They took off from the continental United States. This is the most distant mission they have ever participated in. In total, more than 125 aircraft were involved in the operation. The 14-ton GBU-57 is a guided bunker buster bomb. It is extremely complex and extremely expensive. Boeing has made only 20 of them. Without breaking apart, it burrows into solid rock to a depth of 60 meters and detonates in such a way that it causes a mini earthquake. It is with these bombs that the United States destroys Iran's main nuclear facility, Fordo. It is built deep underground. Another 30 famous Tomahawk cruise missiles destroy secret nuclear facilities in Isfahan and Natanz. Military experts and even politicians would later write, "On Friday the 13th, Israel simply did the dirty work, destroying all of Iran's air defenses so that American bombers could carry out these strikes unhindered." But on the night of June 22nd, Trump made perhaps the most difficult decision of his life. Now he would simply have to speak. If it weren't for him, this war would not have happened. In the middle of the night, Trump comes out to the journalists to make a brief statement.
Our goal was to destroy Iran's nuclear fuel enrichment capabilities and to eliminate the nuclear threat posed by the world's #1 state sponsor of terrorism. Today, I can announce to the entire world that the strikes were incredibly successful. Iran's main nuclear fuel enrichment facilities have been completely destroyed.
The whole world held its breath. The first to support Trump is Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
Congratulations, President Trump. Your bold decision to attack Iran's nuclear facilities with the impressive and righteous power of the United States will change history. President Trump, thank you. People of Israel, thank you.
While the whole world waits to see what will happen next, the only ones to openly come to Iran's defense are the Yemeni Houthis. That's how it is. Iran is calling on international organizations and its allies to respond to the US strikes. And what about Russia, its main strategic partner? By the evening, the Russian Foreign Ministry managed only to issue a strong condemnation on its official website. Wait, is that how you support your strategic partners? Was Iran attacked? Where is the military aid? Where is the severing of diplomatic relations with Israel, with the United States? And where, after all, are those demonstrations at the UN? The Russians always abandon their own. And the whole world is starting to realize this. Why did Israel and the United States attack Iran right now? Former Foreign Minister Pavlo Klimkin has this perspective. Israel, with the support of the United States, had been preparing for this operation for a long time.
They deliberately and very systematically targeted Hamas, Hezbollah, and tried to fight the Houthis in Yemen in order to weaken Iran and all those who could potentially attack Israel.
It is still unknown how Iran will act after these attacks, but it is already clear that this war is very untimely for Ukraine. We decided to weigh all the minuses and pluses. So, the minuses for Ukraine. Oil has already jumped from $70 to $78 per barrel and could rise even further.
Prices could go up. Well, the estimates vary. So there are like $120 per barrel, approximately. If the situation develops according to the worst-case scenario,
Russia will earn more.
Russia will earn more, and accordingly, it will have more money for the war against us.
This week, the Russians carried out horrific strikes on Kyiv. Dozens of people were killed, but these video clips barely made it into the broadcasts of the world's leading media outlets. Attention is focused on the Iran-Israel war. The Russians are taking advantage of this shift in focus and launching their attacks. Moreover, they use Israel's attack on Iran to justify their own aggression.
So why is it allowed for Israel, but not for others?
This is a very dangerous situation. It undermines the very concept of sovereignty, because Putin is also constantly saying, we'll take away this part of Ukraine's sovereignty and that part and another part. And this means we're heading towards some kind of mega escalation in the future.
During any conflict, there is a shortage of weapons. They become less available on the market. But this is not just a disadvantage for Ukraine. Iran supplied Russia with Shayets, and recently, components for these drones. It supplied artillery shells. Now, obviously, it will no longer supply them. Missiles, there is no concrete evidence that Iran sent them, but it is clear that now it won't either. But there are also advantages for Ukraine. Russia is rapidly losing its image as a powerful state. Its allies are realizing that it can no longer help them. Another advantage. Old Europe is finally starting to realize the problems on the continent are its own problems, and it's time to start solving them.
This story between Israel and Iran may not benefit us tomorrow, but in the long run it could be positive for us. If the Americans shift their focus to the Far East, to Western Asia, then the Europeans will still have to take care of themselves. And it's better for them to take care of themselves together with us.
Such an unexpected war for the whole world, and for Iran itself, Iran, which has repeatedly promised to destroy, to wipe Israel off the face of the earth, and has openly threatened the US as well. And now, political analysts are wondering whether the Iranian regime itself will survive after these attacks. To appreciate the courage and even the audacity of Israel, just look at the map. See, this is Iran, and over there is Israel. What, you can't see Israel? Well, let's zoom in on the map. So, one of the main conclusions of the Iran-Israel war for us is that even a very small country can defeat a much larger country, one that is many times bigger in terms of territory and human resources. The key is to have a modern army and the latest weaponry. And it's also preferable to have powerful allies backing you, especially if they have the best bombers and the most powerful bombs in the world in their arsenal. Alexander Zagrodny, Volodymyr Ostapenko, Ivan Pavlovich. The same week, Hour Plus One, United News Marathon.
A little fly is buzzing in the background, and it was precisely the events in the Middle East that Trump formally used to explain his actual escape from the G7 summit in Canada. He ran away to avoid meeting with President Zelensky. This version is still being discussed because the Ukrainian leader was invited specifically to talk about possible US sanctions against Russia, as well as the sale of American weapons to Ukraine. Tuesday at the summit was supposed to be Ukraine's day, but on the eve of it, Trump suddenly cut his visit short and returned to the States. At the dinner with the G7 partners, he only had time to complain that Putin wasn't there. Trump still believes that expelling Russia from the G8 was a mistake, one that ultimately led to the war. And as for Putin, it's clear he understood that his hands were untied. And it was precisely during the G7 summit that he demonstratively carried out one of the largest attacks on Ukraine. And what's more, for the first time in many years, the United States and the G7 were unable to agree even on a joint final statement. Cynics have already started calling the G7 the G6, or at least G7 minus. However, it's not worth dismissing the results of even such a meeting of world leaders. And the Ukrainian issue was not the only thing that irritated the American president. At that moment, Trump truly had to make a critical decision for himself whether to drag the US into a major war with Iran or not. Macron's trolling with a stopover in Greenland and promises of joint defense actions with Denmark also did not add any warmth to the White House host's conversations. For example, former Ukrainian Foreign Minister Pavlo Klimkin suggested that canceling the meeting might have even been beneficial. No one knows what the impulsive President Trump might have said in this situation. So, what was Ukraine able to achieve in Canada? President Zelensky announced that there are concrete decisions regarding increased military support, new tranches of aid from frozen Russian assets, and additional sanctions against those fueling Russia's war. The next arena for diplomatic battles is the NATO summit next week in The Hague, although, according to the press, there will not be an official working session between Zelensky and NATO leaders as there was last year in Washington. But there is still another chance for a personal meeting between the presidents of the United States and Ukraine. They are both expected to attend the leaders' dinner hosted by the King of the Netherlands. And the shortened format of the summit, tailored specifically for the American leader, along with his current as he sees it, victory in Iran should help put Trump in the right mood for a conversation with Zelensky. After that, Europe is preparing for any scenario, and it is precisely the outcomes in The Hague that will form the foundation for its future decisions regarding NATO, regarding Ukraine, and regarding the role of the European Union in a world without America. The President of the European Council, Antonio Costa, has already published the agenda for the summit of the 27 heads of state and government of the EU on June 26-27. The topics are the economy, defense, and Ukraine. And President Zelensky has already received an invitation. Thanks to our good drones, we can destroy enemy weapons, even at the idea stage. This week, Ukrainian drones stopped one of Russia's largest military factories. Here it is on the map. The academician Shipunov Instrument Design Bureau in Tula developed high-precision weapons and was very important for the Russian military-industrial complex and personally for Putin. Here is a photo of it in December 2022, and already in 2025, precise strikes first on the electrical substation, then on the administrative building and warehouses caused a massive fire. The second attack on the night of June 20 damaged the hangar for finished products. As a result, the plant came to a halt. There were explosions and fires almost every night, not just here. Take a look at this map. The Russian Ministry of Defense claimed that they stopped 402 Ukrainian drones. So how many of them actually made it through the air defenses? They wouldn't have declared a carpet plan at airports in several regions for no reason. And here is video evidence of a strike on the Volgograd airfield.
Can anyone perhaps tell me what exactly is going on here in this situation?
Please, can someone tell me what's burning over there? That smoke is just intense. The same thing was filmed in the Rostov region. That's where the Milerovo airport is, from which Shaheds are regularly launched at our country. But Russians weren't just complaining about explosions in their regions. During the alert, they also started jamming mobile internet. Because of this, the largest boiler house in Pskov shut down. Without coverage, they can't quickly detect problems in the pipes. Whether the residents of the region will connect this to the war started by their dictator is unknown. But the fact that Russians are apparently already feeling the impact in their wallets seems to have been acknowledged by high-ranking officials for the first time. The much-hyped St. Petersburg Economic Forum, promoted by the Russian authorities, turned out to be a flop. There were no foreign guests except for the Taliban. Putin once again made absurd statements about one people and about considering Ukraine as his own. But everyone paid attention to the word recession from the Minister of Economy and the alarming forecast from the head of the central bank. There is nothing left to patch the holes in the budget. The resources have all been exhausted. It seems that the sanctions are indeed working, and the planned 18th EU sanctions package will be especially painful. And now moving on to another political intrigue of the week, the visit of the US President's Special Representative Keith Kellogg to the Belarusian dictator. Lukashenko, who once flirted with the West but now loyally serves Putin, did not hide the fact that this visit, I quote, caused quite a stir around the world. An even bigger stir was caused by his demonstrative gesture on the day of Kellogg's arrival. Supposedly, at Trump's request, Lukashenko released one of the most well-known Belarusian political prisoners, Sergei Tikhanovsky, along with 13 other political prisoners. They were taken to Lithuania. Mikhailo Podolyak, advisor to the head of the office of the President of Ukraine, believes that Kellogg is looking for opportunities to expand the window for dialogue with Russia. And the influential Reuters agency, citing an unnamed American official, wrote that the Trump administration internally discussed ways to pull Minsk out of Moscow's sphere of influence and bring it closer to Washington, at least partially. I think we'll find out the answer soon, but turning illegitimate dictators into people you can already shake hands with seems to be becoming a hallmark of the Trump administration.